Okay, good evening all on playchess.com and streaming to YouTube. Okay, so this week I thought we'd carry on the Fischer Spassky match, looking at game 8. So game 8 was fascinating, and I've actually found a website which actually has the move scores as well. So if you have move score questions, times, not move scores, the times for each move, then just ask. So in game 8, Fischer kicked off with c4, the English opening. So remember that for most of his career he was just playing e4 exclusively. So here he's playing the English opening, c5, and the symmetrical response is a very solid, respectable way of handling the English opening. The English opening is symmetrical. In fact, I think it's one of the more popular moves here. Let's also connect to Livebook and add a bit to. Yeah, it is one of the more popular responses. And Fischer plays knight c3, and we have knight c6. So mirroring white for the moment. Again, knight f3, and we see a mirroring knight f6. And actually mirroring in the English opening in particular can sometimes go on for quite a bit. I had a bit of a wind-up game. I was playing white against someone in the British Championship once, one of the British Championships. And if you make a slight mistake, they don't need to mirror you. So on the other hand, if you mate first, then you won the game. So yeah, mirroring's got its pros and cons. So the opponent can sometimes just look at your move and decide, do I need to mirror it or should I vary? So here Fischer plays g3 and Spassky decides, yeah, g3 is a cool move. I think I'll play the equivalent of that. So mirroring it with g6. Bishop g2, yes, very logical. I'll copy that. Bishop g7. Casting, yeah, that's good as well. I'll castle as well. So here, Fischer now played a move which probably is a bit risky to mirror. The move was d4. In Livebook, d4 is the top move, and black usually doesn't play d5 here, but actually usually plays d6 is quite frequent, it seems, or c takes as the game. I think if the mirroring, there's something's going to happen which is bad for black. Yeah, this is not too hot for black. Let's just actually add a bit to Fritz 1. I mean, if we took this to the extreme, where would it crack for black, just out of interest? Well, here, queen takes a5, yeah, you can't mirror that. So here, white might become apparently slightly better in this position. So yeah, black can't carry on too much. So anyway, d4, yes, d4. In Livebook, another way of playing this, apart from the game continuation, is d6. This is by far the most popular way, actually. Not by far, but there's over 1,200 games with d6, and so things could go, according to Livebook, like d5, like a5, and this is quite popular to play with black. If you look at this position, black is playing for the b5 move, which is a logical kind of way of blasting white center. But anyway, yeah, no, d6 wasn't played. We see c takes d4, and sometimes this c takes d4 can be positionally painful for black, because white has a nice control in this position, nice control over d5. This d file can sometimes be a pain. If black plays d6 later, often white's playing for c5 to leave black potentially with a backward pawn on the d file. So you know, this has got some pitfalls, this position for black, and in fact the immediate issue is how to actually develop the queen side here. If you play d6, that just loses a pawn basically. for not much in this particular position. Just the pawn down really. If you play, well, what can you play? b6 again loses a pawn. Just take on c6. So there's not too many things here. I don't think a6 is particularly palatable. Positionally c5, it seems that will discourage any d6, leaving a potentially bad pawn structure. And this, I think this is even worse to do this sort of thing. There's knight takes c6 here, hitting the queen. So yeah, black has got limited choices here in this position, and what he does seems quite sensible in this particular position, to try and develop the queen side, which is to play knight takes d4. Apparently there might be another way of playing this position, which is popular, knight g4. So game continuations are often like this. This might be palatable as well, where apparently it's about equal here, this kind of thing. But okay, so yeah, we get knight takes d4, not knight g4, queen takes d4, and now, okay, the queen looks to be exposed, right? But there's nothing major at the moment to exploit that. So d6, the queen just sits there here in this position, the way Fischer played it, which is slightly unusual, because actually the most popular moves are to get the queen away from this glare of this bishop. Queen d3, queen d2, these have all been seen quite a lot before. Queen h4. Fischer's move is actually rarer than all these three. He leaves the queen on d4. He plays the move bishop g5. 63 games in live book only. Bishop g5. By far the most popular actually was queen d3, 908 games, and you usually get games like this where white enjoys that bind on the d5 square. Okay, so this is a slightly unusual move. Was it prepared for the match? Maybe. I can tell you the move time on bishop g5. Let's see. So bishop g5, what was the move time? Because that might imply if it was preparation. Move 10. Fischer spent apparently, I think 8 minutes. Yeah, his clock showed 17 minutes at queen takes d4. So apparently 8 minutes, but I don't know if that was a camouflage for something. It was, okay, so anyway. So bishop g5, what is the bishop doing there? Is it asking to be kicked with h6? And maybe this was the interesting point here about bishop g5, which is bypassed by Spassky's move, which is actually just bishop e6. But you know, if we look at the kicking move, is the bishop asking for a kicking? Bishop takes f6. You might think, why on earth would you do bishop takes f6 and give up the dark square bishop? There's something about this position which is unpleasant. You don't want to have a damaged pawn structure. The queen goes back, and actually, given that knight d5 is kind of threatened and the bishop can't move without dropping b7, imagine the bishop goes back here, then this position is quite a bind. This position here, and this might, I'm speculating, this might have been the idea of bishop g5 to reach this position, because it's actually fairly unpleasant for black faced with c5. And I know this is crazy in some respects to give up a dark square bishop for this d-file pressure, but this is actually a pin now on the d6 pawn, and what does black do in this position? It's a bit of a bind. There might be some dynamic way of playing this with black, but the engine actually gives this almost half a pawn advantage to white. So for me, that's one incredible thing behind the scenes, technically, about this game. If this had been a bit of preparation to get this position, what does black actually do here to try and equalise? The engine suggestions, this, giving up a pawn here, bishop d5, bishop takes it. It looks like a bind to me, but maybe black's got a little bit of counterplay. I don't know, it looks a bit nebulous. So it's an interesting thing. If that had been designed for h6, but yeah, Spassky bypasses this, and this seems a really logical move, really strong actually, because it actually carries a threat here, well, potentially, of knight d5 hitting the queen and going to double the pawns potentially, as well as logically, you know, the c4 pawn is an obvious target here. It sits on the semi-open file. Why not start pressurizing the c4 pawn as well? So that seems a perfectly logical move. And this for me carries great mystery as well now, this next move in this position to get out of the way. Well, in this position apparently bishop d2, I think maybe transposing back, but then black is better. Knight d5, knight takes here. This position, black's enjoying himself greatly. b5, great. So bishop d2 is not brilliant, yeah, and it's been the most played here according to live, 150 games. Queen h4 is not brilliant because the queen kind of loses contact. Although it stops h6, it loses contact with the d file, and it's quite more committed here. Fischer's move is actually really quite intriguing, so rarer than either of those two. Queen f4, and it's just, for me, it's like strange in many respects, but functionality wise, not only it discourages h6 from black, the queen can actually come back potentially and still discourage h6 and keep an eye on the d5 square, but of course, yeah, the c4 pawn would need to be supported. But if the queen sits on d2, then b3 might become possible, etc. And then white will have a position with that d-file pressure, which sometimes is painful, especially in conjunction with c5, but also keeping h6 at bay. So it's quite interesting. Queen f4 instead of queen h4. On queen h4, I mean, this seems like the really natural move to play queen h4. But I think, you know, black's position is quite nice. Queen a5, potentially just going to start hitting c4 and causing some pain. And this, you know, no b3 because this is like loose, this knight. So, you know, it's not that much fun for white, this position, potentially. So yeah, the queen f4 move is intriguing. I don't know how many of you would consider queen f4 instead of queen h4. But yeah, there's a promise of greater, you know, central control here, to try and keep black's counterplay minimal. So now, I mean, the engine choice actually doesn't even mention queen f4, but anyway. Okay, so queen f4. How many minutes was spent on queen f4? That's another question. I just want to tell you. On move 11, virtually no time was spent on queen f4, so it might have been part of preparation, because, you know, bishop g5, 25 minutes spent, queen f4, still 25 minutes spent, so virtually no time on that move. Preparation maybe. We have queen a5, and now, yes, white really wants to prepare, you know, to protect the pawn. This next move just protects the knight, so if this is bombarded, then b3 becomes possible. Black didn't actually hit c4 immediately here. He actually played rook a b8. But if black plays rook a c8, b3 is possible without losing the knight, yeah? So this is a very important move to be able to play b3. You might think, hold on, there's another option here. Instead of this queen a5, it has been suggested, why not just hit c4 straight away here? This might actually be technically one of the better moves. What does white actually do here? If b3, we've got a loose piece issue, like g4. This starts to look a bit precarious, this position. This position here might actually be better for black. Say bishop e3, black could snap off this bishop, and say bishop f4, g5. This is actually looking, technically this might actually be quite good for black. This kind of thing, even giving up here, and then b5 whack. Yeah, c4 is a real liability in many of these examples. That c4 pawn can turn out to be a massive liability. So maybe a slight improvement on queen a5. It was been mentioned by many commentators on this game, might have been to immediately put more pressure on that c4 pawn. So queen a5 may be a little bit of a let-off move, you know, letting white organise for b3 more comfortably. So rook ac1, organising for b3 potentially. But black's not interested in c4 here. He's going for rook ab8, it seems. So he wants to play for this sort of plan. We see b3, rook fc8. And the queen retreats back to d2. So that's the perk of going there. So the queen's come back. And you might think, what is this stuff? It's, you know, the queen going to f4 was quite an unusual idea. But you see here, it's kind of, things have worked out. White's still got a bind against h6. White's on the d5 square from these pieces. This is a classic d5, you know, control that players that play the English relish, that grip on the d5 square. So what does Spassky do here? Well, c4 is still a theoretical target and a target for a6 and b5, it would seem. Here we see a6, so b5 coming next as the positional threat. Now this next move was meant, I believe, to be preventative. Bishop e3 trying to completely dissuade b5 because of bishop a7 winning the exchange. However, Spassky seemed he plays b5 anyway, perhaps thinking the exchange sacrifice might be justified, because he would still have the bishop pair and he would also have a pawn. But what do you guys think? Oh, sorry. Hi. You think mine's better? Yeah. So if there wasn't this committal decision, let's have a look for a moment before b5. There are some other options here. b6. It doesn't lose the exchange, it keeps that closed. b6 is not outrageously bad. This position here might be interesting. h5. Trying to weaken, you know, the dark squares. This sort of thing might be okay. You know, if white ever plays h4, then, you know, knight g4. So, you know, this isn't so bad because black potentially has good dark square pressure in the king's engine generally. Yeah, this position here. So, you know, b6 might be palatable. Queen h5 might be palatable because it's a nuisance. It's looking at e2. You know, what does white do here? So anyway, it's a very, very committal decision, this b5, losing the exchange. So we see bishop a7, b takes c4, so white takes that exchange, and he should really take on c4, which he does, because otherwise then this will be getting nasty, black's compensation. So the name of the game here is to minimize the compensation that black has. So we see b takes c4, bishop takes c4. So okay, black has the bishop pair, has active pieces, has more central pawns in a way, has pressure on a2. Can all this stuff be neutralized? Well, Fischer's first move here is rook fd1. And it protects the queen. This move actually just protects the queen. And in terms of protected things and unprotected things, black has here an unprotected bishop, an unprotected queen, an unprotected e7 pawn in this position. Queen takes, rook takes, bishop takes, bishop takes. This position here is still nice for white. He's the exchange up, and he's got rid of black's bishop pair. So it's still nice for white. But what was really this next move, I think Spassky spent 4 minutes on 19 knight d7. He spent 4 minutes on this move. 19 knight d7 is crackteam.org, and they have the times. Yes, his previous clock time was 1 hour 41, and it turned into 1 hour 45 used after knight d7. Can anyone see a slight snag? White to play here as a slight snag of knight d7. White play. What's play? I suppose many of you have seen this game before, but this does increase white's advantage, actually, this next move. Can you see what white plays? Yeah, I mean, you get this tactic in Sicilian Dragons quite a lot, this knight d5 tactic, hitting e7 and this queen. But there's a problem here. It's not just about e7, it's this loose piece here. This is the real pain as well in this particular position. So after queen takes, knight takes e7, king f8 is not good enough to hit e7 here, because we've still got this loose bishop on c4. So rook takes d2, king takes e7, rook takes c4. So basically black, from having some compensation for being the exchange down, has far less compensation now. He doesn't have the bishop pair. His pawn structure is a bit of a wreck. This rook b1 doesn't actually do much. If white gets organised here, the only hope might be this a pawn in conjunction with the bishop. It's a faint hope. So, in fact, I mean, it seems this was a nervous match, you know, because technically this is a really bad position. This is nearly +3, and we're only at move 23. From an engine point of view, this is like nearly +3 now. Black does throw in the check. Bishop f1. And we see knight c5. It's unpleasant. White unpins the bishop with king g2. So with that unpinning, once this e-pawn moves somewhere, the bishop can move, things can get organised. We see a5 as though there's this faint hope with the pawn and this coordination. If black can only win a2, is that really going to happen? We see e4, and with e4 this knight's a little bit vulnerable potentially to f4 and e5, undermining that knight. It's not so nicely perched on c5. It just needs f4 e5 to give it a blast shock, and it's not going to be so happy there. The parrot's going to be pushed off the perch there. So bishop a1 was played, maybe trying to keep the bishop having an influence on the diagonal. But white now plays for this c5 knight now, in any case with f4. So e5 is the immediate major positional threat here, hitting that vulnerable d6 pawn, and that knight's vulnerable here as a tactical target. So yes, this bishop a1 looks a bit odd, but it seems as though black, by playing in this manner with the bishop here now, is reinforcing against e5 to try and help the safety of the knight. Okay, now white pursues the idea of e5 with this next move, rook e2. So again, potentially e5 might be useful coming up in this position potentially. And black again tries to safeguard that e5 square. Just to show this, is this really a threat or not? Let's just check. A token move. I think it might not be that bad. F takes, as long as black doesn't play bishop takes. No, it is pretty dire, because if bishop takes, we just take here and then take here. Yeah, this is pretty bad as things go, and it can't really be allowed. So yeah, we see king e6 trying to safeguard against e5, and then we see rook ec2, and I believe the motive here might simply be to play rook c1 to simplify the position, and black stops rook c1 with bishop b2, and we see bishop e2 now. So again, you know, white might want to simplify later like this with the bishop supporting d1, and in fact we see black playing h5 and rook d2. So rook d1 now is potentially on the cards, but also in this position f5 is also interesting, yeah, because the bishop's also looking at h5 and stuff. We see black playing bishop a3 here, but that doesn't safeguard against f5. f5 is played, breaking up black's pawns. So you see that black's got really splintered pawns now. His pawn structure's a wreck. If he took on f5 here, I think there's a neat little tactic. Can you see it in this position? This is a disaster. White play and win. There's a neat little tactic here. It's a crushing tactic. Can you see it? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now. This wasn't played. King takes f5 wasn't played. Yeah. Okay, many of you have found that on stream. Rook takes c5, getting that d3 square for this nasty fork check. Okay, so bad idea to take on f5 with the king. We see king e5 instead. Rook cd4. Threatening actually a mate in 3 in this position apparently, with rook d5 check. I'm curious why this is exactly a mate in 3. Black played king takes f5 here. I just want to make sure that's a mate in 3. Hold on a second, let's try h4. So check. Yes, the king can't go there. Oh, that's why the pawn's stopping king e6. So this would be a mate in 3, check, and rook e2, checkmate. So basically Spassky should really try and, if that pawn's part of this mating net, he takes it off here. Yeah, he takes it off with king takes f5. So it might actually be the best move. We see check. And here now king e6 was played, which might be the best move in the circumstance. If king g6, we have that tactic again. This is a bad diagonal. Rook takes c5 for bishop d3 check, ending the game really. So yeah, king e6 was played, which is really unpleasant. Rook takes d6 check, king e7, and the final move of the game is rook c6, and Spassky resigned here it does seem like quite a bad position. Just as an example, so why did Spassky resign here? Let's have a look. If h4, as an example, check. Now if the king goes back, I think that's a mate in 2 with check and rook d8 mate. And if the king goes forward, then this bishop c4 check, and then the king, if it goes to f5 here, then there's this familiar tactic to win that rook again, be a rook up. Or if in this position, king e5 check, and here if king e4, it's a mate in 2 with check, and then like the mate in 2, and if king e6, then white just trivially wins material with check. So yes, it's a total disaster after this rook c6. In this particular position, it seems both rooks are really working well with this bishop along the diagonals and these diagonals, etc. All these diagonals, all these files, all these rows, they're all working really well for all 3 pieces here. So rook c6, yeah, Spassky resigned. If anyone wants to test any other moves here, well, let's have a quick look. Knight e4, check, check. This position, check. Bishop d3. It's just asking for skewers and stuff. It's falling apart here. Check. And if the black king goes back here, well, it's all falling apart. You get the gist, I think. Yeah, so rook c6, it's falling apart after rook c6. Does someone want to question this position? Rook c6, black to play. Any ideas? The engine's best suggestion here, maybe I should mention this, is to play f5. So apparently this continuation, bishop takes, knight e4 here, but white is now threatening g4, king d7 here. It seems to be falling apart. There's still g4 on the cards, there's bishop g6 on the cards here, looking to do something. Doesn't matter, bishop g6. This position is falling apart, but this technically, I'm just showing you the best continuation for black. It starts to fall apart eventually. Black is the exchange down, so I don't know how much evidence you need, but f5's given us the top move here to play on, if black wanted to play on. I mean, if it was a blitz game, maybe, you know, that's interesting. f5. It's a little bit scary. Rook e5, let's carry this on. c1, bishop takes. It's just the exchange down, 2 connected pass pawns, end of game. So yeah, rook c6. Okay, let's have a quick whiz through this game. So yeah, you know, it's strange, this territory that Fischer's created with the English opening all of a sudden after his whole career has been with e4. So he gets, and it's very strange stuff going on with bishop g5 and queen f4. I think there was a tiny weakness to this system. You know, nowadays this would be prepared against, and I think black wouldn't play queen a5. It seems the most accurate way. It is to consider rook c8 anyway. But black didn't need to sack the exchange. Why do you think Spassky sacrificed the exchange? Does anyone have any psychological or other chess? Okay, if I pose that question, why did Spassky sack the exchange? Does anyone have any inside information? Why? It seems there are other plausible moves. The queen h5 doesn't seem a total bust for black. How does one exploit this queen on h5? h4? h4, is that a move? I'm not sure what black is actually threatening. Knight g4. Alright, against knight g4. h4 against knight g4. If knight g4 here. Is this so bad for black? This position. There's a bit of a bind actually. This position's a bit of a bind, to be honest. The queen's a bit offside. This doesn't look ideal at all. This does not look ideal for black. It looks a bit like a hack attack gone wrong, with maybe c5 coming up. Yeah, it looks as though white's significantly better. So I'm not sure queen h5 is brilliant when you look at it in detail. Possibly this looks really a bit weird, but b6, if it's solid, it's solid. It stops that diagonal. Maybe this was the way to play it. Here, at g4. This position. Again, it seems as though white might end up with a positional advantage. It does quite a bit, that b6 move. Don't know. White. I think this is much better than the game continuation anyway. It seems b6 seems plausible here. b6 seems, it looks like a computer move in many respects, though. I don't think it's even in live book, b6. I don't think it's in live book. Queen h5, bishop d7, or b5 are in live book. It's not even mentioned in live book. I don't know if anyone's ever played it in a serious game, b6. But yeah, b5 just seemed to lose the exchange. It's the disaster here which really seals black's fate, though. This knight d7, this position with the bishop pair might not be. There's a bit of a fight here. Say this position. There's a bit of a fight. Black has that bishop pair, and it's not going to be that easy to win this. It's just the game continuation made it a lot easier. So yeah, this move, which 4 minutes was spent over, 4 minutes to play knight d7. It just lost all the compensation. So it hits e7, hits the queen, hits the bishop. It lost all the compensation for the exchange sack. Does anyone else have any questions about this game? So any questions? 20 seconds for any questions about this game? Should we leave it? Okay, we'll leave it till next week, yeah? If there's no questions. So worst game of the match. I don't know if it was the worst game of the match. Interesting. Oh, if you want to see the move times, I can give you the URL to check out the move times for this game. Oh, it's actually quite a complicated URL. crapteam.org game 8. I can try and give you the URL on chat if you just note down. Spassky game 8. If you want to check out this URL, for some reason, I don't know why they've got the move times, how they got it, but have a look at this. I'm pasting you a link for the move times. Okay, all right, thanks. Okay, hope that's useful. Thanks. See you next week. Thanks, guys. So have a good week. See you next week.